Good morning. Good morning. I'll give everyone a moment to get to your seats. Good morning and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started with the CRTPO TCC committee meeting. Today is October 3rd, 2024, and the time is 10:03. We'll start with introductions at the table, starting with you, James.
James Kelly, Town of Waxhaw.
Tracy Howe, pedestrian focus area.
Heather Maloney, Town of Huntersville.
Rich Hoffman, Iredell County.
Matt Kirkendall, City of Statesville.
Erica Martin, Town of Mooresville.
Vaughn Hanson, Village of Wesley Chapel.
Aaron Tucker, Town of Cornelius.
Todd Huntsinger, Town of Indian Trail.
Roger Castillo, NCDOT, TPD.
Bjorn Hanson, Union County.
Justin Russell, Town of Stallings.
Andrew Ventresca, Town of Troutman.
Travis Johnson, CRTPO.
Liz Babson, City of Charlotte.
Dan Lever, Charlotte General Services.
Anil Panicker, NCDOT Division 12.
Megan Green, Mecklenburg County Air Quality.
Andrew Golden, Town of Davidson.
Dave Campbell, Charlotte DOT.
Sean Epperson, NCDOT Division 10.
Susan Habina Willer, Town of Matthews.
Thank you. And now we'll do audience introductions, starting with you to the left.
Town of Waxhaw.
Bob Cook, CRTPO.
Loretta Barron, Federal Highway Administration.
Justin Carroll, Charlotte DOT.
Brett Knipe, NCDOT Division 10.
Carla Swanson, NCDOT. Kate Turnbull, agent.
Andrew White, Turnpike. Warren Cooksey, Turnpike Authority.
Hayes with NCDOT Division 10.
Elizabeth Richard, Kinley Horn.
Thomas Shirley, Kinley Horn.
Nat Hayward, Kimley 1.
Neil Burke, CRTPO.
Judy Dellert, CRTPO.
Will Snyder, CRTPO.
Martin Kinnaman, CDOT.
Joanna Quinn, CDOT.
David Buchanan, NCDOT.
All right, and moving over here.
Jennifer Stafford. Joe Thompson,
Brian Elbert, CRTPO.
CRTPO. Bruce Bruce, CRTPO.
All right, thank you. And again, welcome everyone. We have a packed agenda today. So with our first action, may I have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Next, we have the approval of our consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the September 5th, 2024 TCC minutes, the 2024-2033 TIP amendments, and the FY 2025 UPWP amendment, Union County Transportation UCT.
So moved.
And may I have a second? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That also carries unanimously. Thank you. And with that, I would like to welcome our partners from NCDOT. At our last TCC meeting, there was a request to have NCDOT come and present an information item to this body. They have been working closely with our CRTPO board members, and as the technical coordinating committee, we'd like to have some information as well so we can appropriately support those elected officials. Thank you, Brett and Carly. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's good to be back at the TCC. I haven't been here in quite some time, but for those that don't know me, my name is Brett Knipe. I'm the NCDOT's Division 10 engineer. We've got Carly Swanson and David Roy also with North Carolina Turnpike Authority that have been helping on this effort for quite some time. And so we want to go over and try to give an update to most of you who may be familiar with the I-77 South Express Lanes project. We'll go into a little bit of detail and explain, what we've been working on over the last several years and how we got to where we are today. But I thought, coming here on a Thursday has been difficult for me. This day happens to coincide with NCDOT's Board of Transportation meeting each month. And so it's one reason many of y'all haven't seen me here in quite some time, as I'm typically gone to Raleigh. But because of Hurricane Helene and the response effort that's been going on, The department consolidated this week's board meeting, held one day virtually just yesterday. And so that really made it a little more convenient for me to be here. But, I think I want to point out that, what's going on in the western part of North Carolina right now should put everything in perspective for all of us. I know that everyone here is involved in, some level of public service, and I know everybody's got social media. Y'all probably have friends out there. Maybe some of y'all have seen it firsthand, but just incredible amount of damage that's come from that hurricane. So many personal lives affected, and NCDOT is trying to really focus on that. Really, it is our top priority right now, and so we've got crews gone from every single division, including Division 10. To go out and assist our western divisions in that recovery. I've been on statewide calls listening to these folks that are dealing with this and trying to figure out how to help allocate resources every day since the event. It is just the amount of damage to folks and their lives and their property and our public infrastructure is just something I've never seen. So I couldn't start this meeting without mentioning that, and just thinking about those people, and we all got to keep them in our prayers and do what we can to assist. But so I want to go on to the presentation now. I'm not sure if who all here has seen information related to the I-77 South project. We've been conducting a comparative analysis is really what we're here to talk about. Between a public-private partnership delivery versus a North Carolina Turnpike delivery or a traditional toll delivery of this project. We were asked to complete this comparative analysis by the MPO, and we've been working on that for, feels like a couple of years. I think maybe it's going on a year and a half. So we provided a lot of responses to some questions the TPO board members had last month. We also have sent out a supplemental report that explains this comparative analysis in great detail. So if anyone is looking for some great reading material, I'm sure you can get your hands on that. If not, we can get it to you, and you can flip through that and get into the nitty gritty and nuts and bolts of how all of this came together. I was hoping that would do it. It didn't do it. So we'll talk about the project overview, exactly what this project is, the limits and the cost and the impacts and all that. And Carly will go into greater detail about the project history and cover the comparative analysis. And I'll try to bring it back together. And then, of course, in the end, we're always going to take questions from the group. So we're talking about a STIP project. It's I-5718. It's been around for really decades now, decade plus. It's a widening of I-77 by managed lanes from the Brookshire Freeway down to the South Carolina state line. The last time the corridor saw any improvements was in the 90s when it was widened out to 6 lanes from 4. And I'm sure every single one of us in this room has been on that corridor enough to know the challenges that it offers drivers. One thing that I'll point out about what this corridor really is it's really one of the most congested corridors in the state of North Carolina. It's carrying more traffic than most other interstates of its kind, and it's more congested than most other interstates. And if you start relating congestion to crashes, you see there is a direct correlation. And so there's a crash rate that's 2.5 times higher on this segment of I-77 than on any other similar urban interstate. And so that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about a very congested corridor that's, kind of got, I would call it not modern interchange designs, right? We've all been through there and seen the difficulty, the proximity of interchanges and how that weaving action can impede traffic flow. And so the project we're talking about would modernize all that. It would reconstruct nearly every interchange, if not all the interchanges in the corridor. Because of that reconstruction need, we're nearing a $4 billion price tag. 3.7 billion is the current estimate. So it's a very expensive project, but obviously a project of great need. So I'm going to turn it over to Carly to talk to you guys a little bit more about project history and how we got here really today. Thanks.
Good morning. As Brett said, I'm Carly Swanson. I'm the Director of Innovative Delivery. I work with Brett and David and others in the department to help support projects that communities have asked us to deliver. As Brett said, first, I'm going to start with the project history. As you see on the timeline here, it shows that this project has really been under discussion for a very long time now. The concept of managed lanes on this corridor really started in 2007. And I'm going to talk about what's known as the fast lane study on the next slide. But that's what really kickstarted the conversation about managed lanes, not just on this corridor, but other corridors in the region. If you look at the first highlighted box here, that's when CRTPO, known as MUMPO at the time, adopted a resolution supporting fast lanes and identified I-77 for further study of managed lanes projects. If you fast forward to the next highlighted box in 2014, in North Carolina, per state law, all toll projects must receive formal approval from the impacted local planning organization. And that action was taken in 2014 when CRTPO submitted the I-77 South Managed Lanes Project for Prioritization 3.0. There are a couple of additional steps here you see on the timeline, and those are the subsequent rounds of prioritization that the project continued to walk through. I did want to point out, since 2014, when CRTPO first submitted the I-77 South Managed Lanes Project to where we are today, the project cost has actually tripled, which, you heard from Brett earlier, it's about $3.7 billion. In 2023, the CRTPO board requested NCDOT to conduct a comparative analysis, which I will get into further detail on in a couple of slides. But that's what this team has really been working on over the last year in terms of looking at different delivery options to see how we can accelerate this project. In 2024, where we're at today, in May, NCDOT, we did release the P 7.0 scores, and the I-77 South Express Lanes project scored as one of the top projects at the statewide tier with $600 million in state funding. I did want to mention that, during a time of cost increases on our projects, it's a big deal for us to be able to move forward additional projects and add those to our prioritization. The statewide tier where this project received $600 million has $1 billion in it. So this project was 600 out of $1 billion. So it was pretty substantial news for the project. So as I mentioned earlier, the fast lane study, it really kicked off 2007. It was a joint initiative at the time with the City of Charlotte, NCDOT, South Carolina DOT, and CRTPO. We get a question on a semi-regular basis about why managed lanes and why not just add more general purpose lanes. So with experience in different managed lanes projects around the country, adding more general purpose lanes has shown to only provide a short-term relief. So as traffic continues to grow in those areas, like we're seeing it here in this region, the new lanes do return to the same congestion level as before due to induced demand. And so general purpose lanes also don't provide that reliable travel option like express lanes do, like you see on I-77 North today. So you don't have that dedicated lane like you would with an express lane. So I included a link here to CRTPO's website on additional information about express lanes. There are a quarter of states across the U.S. that either have express lanes projects either open to traffic or in development at this time. Tennessee is actually a new state that is working on implementing their first managed lanes, what they're calling choice lanes project in that state. But just a couple points on that, express lanes, they provide that reliable travel time, and they can provide a long-term sustainable solution to issues such as the rising travel demand. So the fast lane study, as I mentioned on the previous slide, was adopted in 2010. So next, I'm going to go into a little more detail about the comparative analysis and potential next steps. As I mentioned on the timeline slide, at the request of the CRTPO board, NCDOT was requested to conduct a comparative analysis, and we looked at two different delivery options: a traditional toll delivery, which is an NC Turnpike state-delivered project, similar to what you would see on the I-485 Express Lanes project, and then a public-private partnership, or P3, which is the delivery model that was used for I-77 North. The analysis was initiated in July of 23, took us about a year to conduct. We had an outside team of advisors that were supporting the analysis. You'll see on the slide here the different companies that supported. We had H&DB providing the program management, RS&H providing the environmental and design work, Stantec with traffic and revenue, KPMG is a known P3 financial advisor for different projects around the country. And then PFM is actually North Carolina Turnpike's financial advisor, and they have supported us with each one of our Turnpike projects to date. So some key points for us along the way with the analysis is that $600 million in state funding that was allocated back in May during P7.0. We did receive initial construction cost and traffic and revenue forecast. We were able to optimize the project costs later in the summer, and then we did update the traffic and revenue findings, which included commercial vehicles. Next, I'm going to go into some of the results of the comparative analysis. As I mentioned earlier, we did look at a traditional toll or state delivery. The analysis shows that the traditional toll delivery approach is not currently financially feasible, and there are a couple of reasons for that. So even with the $600 million in state funding, the project still has a $1.3 billion funding gap. And the funding gap, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Since 2014, the cost of this project has increased. It's tripled. So now we're at $3.7 billion. And the $3.7 billion exceeds our statewide transportation improvement program's annual budget. So knowing that the project lacks sufficient funding, also due to more conservative revenue assumptions that the state has to take, and that's necessary for us to meet public debt financing requirements. So due to the insufficient funding, if the CRTPO board decides not to move forward with the P3, the project would have to come to a logical stopping point due to the insufficient funding, which could cause years of delay. And based on the current cost estimate and inflationary assumptions, each year of delay on the project could add more than $100 million to the project cost, which could ultimately stall the project indefinitely. If the project does not move forward, there would also not be an opportunity for $100 million in bonus allocation funding. So state law with toll projects that move forward, there is opportunity for bonus allocation. So the $100 million could be up for use in the region. So with this option, the preliminary engineering work would stop and the project would need to be rescored with updated cost and revenue projections for P8.0. And the analysis for the P3 toll delivery did show that it is likely financially feasible. So what we did is we looked at P3 projects across the country and adjusted the revenues to those similar P3s. And so the analysis showed that $600 million in funding would be sufficient to cover the public contribution for the project. And there are also a couple of key points to keep in mind too. So as I mentioned with the traditional toll delivery, we have to take a more conservative approach as a state, whereas a private developer can often secure debt from lenders using a more aggressive financial assumption. Additionally, private developers can bring their own equity into the project, which would cover a significant portion of this project's cost, and it would reduce the need for additional state funds. So the analysis ultimately shows that the $600 million would likely cover the public contribution, and if it were decided to move forward with the P3 delivery, it would be eligible for that $100 million in bonus allocation funding for the region. So next, I'm going to walk through some potential next steps. Over the last year and having conversations with the CRTPO board, we've received a lot of feedback, especially lessons learned from I-77 North, our state's first P3. In North Carolina, we do have a cap on the number of P3 toll projects we can deliver. Obviously, our first toll P3 was the I-77 North Express Lanes. In August, we did receive a resolution from a local planning organization on the Outer Banks requesting us to move forward with a P3 for the Mid-Currituck Bridge project. So that would be our second spot. So we do have one spot left for an additional toll P3 project. If it were to move forward, we are going to take a number of steps with the CRTPO board to ensure collaboration and transparency, not just during this time, but as the project continues through construction and ultimately when it would be operational and open to traffic. So CRTPO were to request the department to move forward with a P3 delivery. We would work to create a working group with CRTPO to develop key project objectives and priorities to inform indicative terms. And you'll see a couple of bullets here. These are based on conversations that we've had with the board over the last year and some of the priorities that they have identified. First, optimizing the utilization, not just of the express lanes, but also the general purpose lanes. Encouraging a competitive procurement process to receive multiple fixed bids, which is good for everyone involved. Increasing transparency of the business during all phases of the project and providing benefits to transit. From there, we would provide those draft key terms to the CRTPO board and give them 60 days in advance of any public advertisement to allow time to review those terms and act if they are not acceptable to the board. And it's also important to know that CRTPO can rescind support up at any point up until the department were to publicly advertise for a request for qualifications or RFQ. Now, the graphic down here shows just simply the steps that I just laid out for you all. First, a working group would be created with CRTPO and NCDOT. We would then work to define those key objectives and priorities, and we would draft the key terms for review for 60 days, and then we would advertise for the RFQ. I know Brett has mentioned this on a number of occasions to the board, but we are not advocating for a particular path forward on this. And we will continue to partner with CRTPO to identify those transportation solutions to support mobility throughout the region. And with that, I will turn it back over to Brett.
Thank you, Carly. Did a great job laying all that out and trying to explain what we've been doing all this time. So I just want to recap what Carly went through and really hopefully just focus on what we are really facing here as a choice between delivering a project that the MPO has had on the books for a long time now, that folks that are no longer with us or in the room or in our business even helped stage up transportation solutions with managed lanes in that fast lane study. And here we are, going on 20 years later, trying to figure out how to get this project done. And we've completed this analysis. It tells us that we could deliver this project with a P3. It also tells us that we don't believe we can deliver it as a traditional toll delivery. The funding gap is simply too big. I know with all the projects that you guys also work on and manage with your local programs, you're seeing the same things we've seen over the last several years with cost increases. This project has been impacted no differently. And just the scale and scope of the project, it just puts it out of reach. So ultimately, we're going to ask the MPO board to determine if they want NCDOT and North Carolina Turnpike Authority to pursue this P3. And if the answer is no, we want to keep the traditional toll route, then, recognizing that we don't have the funding for it, we're not going to be able to keep, actively working on the I-5718 project and development. We're going to have to figure out, where the right point is in the NEPA process and bring that to a close. The project could show back up in P8, for example. I don't know that we would find ourselves with any different outcome because, the funding, the funding that we're projecting simply won't cover a project of this cost. So, on top of that, with the inflationary rates that we experience in this industry, as Carly mentioned earlier, we're going to see project cost increase at a rate of $100 million a year. So just a tremendous, hill to climb up. We know it's a difficult decision, but that's where we are. But if we get the vote to pursue a P3, then we've been working with this board long enough, and we've also at the state have we've been working with the 77 North contract for a number of years now. We've got a lot of lessons learned from that contract. And the priority for us is to have a continuation of this transparent, open engagement with the MPO to develop key contract terms that would allow us to get a better result. You know, I mean, as a driver, you know, I personally want to see better results. I want to see better utilization of express lanes. And I think there's an opportunity with the P3 delivery of the 77 South contract to have a better outcome. There's things like transit components that folks might not be thinking about that could be woven into a contract agreement. Y'all probably know that on the express lane system now that transit rides for free. That would be a goal of NCDOT's. And we believe it would also be a goal of the MPO and to keep that consistent plan. But Carly mentioned other places in the country that are also facing this decision. Georgia, the state of Georgia, in the city of Atlanta, SR 400 was a recent project that just went out to this market as an express lanes project. And some of their key contract terms included, like park and ride amenities. Potentially, we could see something like direct connects that would service park and rides, just like we're working on with CATS and on the North Project up at Hambright Road, things like that. But, we could tee this thing up for a better outcome in general. But, with the growth we've got in this region, I don't think this project's or this problem's going to go away. And it's not going away for many other places in the country that are seeing this kind of growth. And that's why planning organizations and municipalities, other state DOTs, they're having to figure out how to tackle things and do things differently. And I think that's really ultimately what's got us here today. We do need to make a decision on this. Hopefully by the end of the year, because we've got to continue our STIP programming. As Carly mentioned, that $600 million that's currently been obligated to this project. If the project goes away, that $600 million may need to go to a different project. But we definitely need to make the decision so we can figure out how to program. So, with that, I think we're wrapping up. Be glad to take any questions from you guys. Yeah.
Was there any thought about breaking up the project?
About breaking it up?
Section, make it more affordable?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And it is something that has come up a number of times. Earlier on, we probably didn't go into a whole lot of detail about this, but we've been working on project development for I-5718 through RS&H since 2019. Kind of looking at Sean because he's been neck deep in it the whole time too. But those questions came up, and if you think about what the 77 South corridor looks like, you need a logical place to break it up, and the traffic that moves through that corridor, it decreases kind of at 485 and at 277. So if you kind of pick some spot in between there, I think you really just move a queue of congestion to a point. Not to mention with the reconstruction of all these interchanges, it would be really difficult to find the point to tie it down to physically make that connection and pick it up again. You'd have a whole lot of rework. So I had been asked that question. My personal opinion was it would be very, very difficult and certainly would cost more in the end to deliver it that way. Yeah.
Question or a couple of comments just from the bicycle perspective. It was great to hear the comment from Ms. Swanson about general purpose lanes and induced demand. So thank you for that. Another thing to think about if you do hear more concerns or more support for general purpose lanes is they also have an impact on bicycling or walking, particularly as the induced traffic tries to get onto and off the freeway. Those are the local streets that people are walking and biking on, and it makes it tougher to make those streets or keep them safe for walking and bicycling. So another thing to consider when you're hearing those concerns from
I'll say this,
commuters.
Yeah, I've been at DOT long enough now to say that I've seen a big transition in how we approach projects, but in particular in an urban area, but really with all of our projects, we have a multimodal focus. And so all the design concepts that we've come up with to this point make pedestrian and bicyclist an absolute priority, particularly at like ramp terminus where they intersect with the side street. You know, that's always that conflict point. You know, the way you design that, lay that out is going to define the safety component for those other modes. And so that's always a top priority. The current concepts and designs that we have today include those considerations for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And these are the kinds of things I think about. With this project, I haven't honestly paid close attention to it because I think there's less bike pieces to it, but happy to pay more attention. The Beyond 77 project is the one that I've been thinking about more.
Yeah.
But even these kinds of projects to improve flow along freeways can have an impact on bicycling and walking.
Sure.
I was also encouraged to hear your comments about improved transit service here, bus service, all that kind of thing, park and ride, super important. That similarly, that's the kind of thing, a bike program person supports, but that could also have an impact on walking and biking as we get all those cars to the park and ride or to the transit station or to the express bus station. People need to walk and bike through that area as well. And that's often been overlooked. And I come from the Bay Area where transit's a little richer there than here, but hopefully will be equal soon. And even there, they would often forget about that, because we're doing so much to improve transit and to improve carpooling. And sometimes that walk and bike piece at the end gets lost when we're moving all the cars into the transit station.
Sure.
So just a
Well,
kind of
I'll tell you, any design concept that we come up with, we've got some pretty good partners at the City of Charlotte Department of Transportation, really. And when we work with any municipality, they help keep us in check when thinking about how to accommodate bikes and peds. So it certainly would remain a priority for us.
Hey, do you mind going back and just helping me understand the funding gap? The project scored well in P 7.0, but there's still a funding gap because it's only going to get 700 million.
Right. So there's number one, there's a corridor cap by legislation, and it's roughly 600 million. It's really a cap based on the anticipated revenue that would go to the statewide tier. And so it's around 600 million. That could change with different, revenue forecasts. But, there's, you've got an amount that can be financed. And if there's detailed questions about that, that's why we brought David Roy. But so there is a little bit of that financing component that would go into that number if you're trying to add them all up. But, ultimately, for this go around, we had roughly $1 billion to program for the whole state in the statewide tier. So, even if we gave all the money and just ignored the law that says we have this corridor cap, you still would have a pretty substantial funding gap.
Yes, I think a lot of us get that equity gap in YP3 versus, just standard funding. Why that's a time value, or it could be done faster. And I think most of us too understand the managed lane strategy for congestion management. I think the toughest question we're having as advisors to our board members, especially multiple jurisdictions, is how would they were worried about the risk of how will this be different than 77 North, right? That's the tough question that as a technical TCC member, I really don't know the answer. How would you frame what are the key lessons from 77 North that will be applied to a P3 in 77 South?
I mean, I think the first is the ongoing dialogue that we've had this entire time. I mean, we've had, I think it was like 9 presentations that we gave to the MPO, and we've gone step by step and tried to explain this whole process. But what we've came down to is this commitment to engage the MPO on what their priorities are, what they want to see out of a contract, what would they want to see, differently than 77 North, but really what would they want to see in any managed lanes project. And so that commitment to me, Brian, is what is the primary difference. And so it's also our own learned experiences. Also, the market has changed a whole lot, with all these projects going on in this country. When 77 North happened, there was not a lot of examples for us to go by. But now that we've seen the components that we could conclude in in a project, I think it's a completely different opportunity this time.
The motivation to bring this to the TCC was to help our board members deliberate on this. They've got a really important decision to make. And they've brought up questions in recent board meetings, and I didn't necessarily see a lot of expansion on what those concerns were to let us know that these things were happening. I almost feel like we've been split into two populations, and it's challenging to close the loop. The concerns about it, being really optimized in terms of the tolling to generate revenue for the private vendor and not necessarily to alleviate congestion on the corridor. And, like the statement of optimizing the project costs, that was a briefing that was given this summer, and that the delta was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, which is pretty startling because it's like, could we have some details on what those changes were that allowed a project cost to change by hundreds of millions of dollars? So, just helping us explain this so it's not, the public coming to us if this vote goes sideways or the project goes sideways, and explaining, well, what information do you use to make the decision? I feel like we're not necessarily getting a complete story. And then also the fact that this started 2 years ago with an unsolicited proposal that didn't require any STIP dollars, and in fact was going to pay us $200 million. I haven't seen an acknowledgement, a post-mortem of why that's no longer an option. I mean, I assume the costs have gone up and they're like, yeah, we can't do that anymore. But the fact that that's what started this conversation and we never referenced that as our starting point, I think that's really important to, again, explain to the public how we got to where we are.
So, I'll maybe start in reverse order there. So we did receive that unsolicited proposal, and we brought that to the MPO as well. The decision was made to not pursue that by the MPO, and really by a work group that we formed with some folks. And that project was not materially different than the project we have in our STIP. So that was the reason we just said, look, let's put this thing to the side, and determine what the local priorities are. And so that was the decision made at the MPO level, not to pursue the unsolicited proposal. Had the unsolicited proposal been pursued, it may have been some similar outcome. At the end of the day, it would have been a competitively bid process, just like this P3 delivery would be a competitively bid process. So I don't know that we'd have had much of a different outcome, but it gave us an opportunity by going through this comparative analysis to determine if we needed to take that approach at all. If we could deliver this in a more traditional manner. And that's what we're saying is we aren't able to do that, considering all these costs. And Bjorn, you mentioned that, the differences in dollars and the cost estimates we've seen. Yep, we did. We had to take a hard look at that and make some really critical decisions at a point where we weren't normally in any project that we develop. And I know you're familiar with this because you work in this business too, but we're going through that NEPA process. We're developing concepts. We've got higher level cost estimates. And so at some point in the future, we would have to take a hard look at that project in greater detail with accurate surveying data and draw the footprint of the project in, reduce impacts, make decisions that would, alter design scope slightly, that would save money. And so we know that process takes place in every project, but in order to get this analysis completed, we had to go ahead and get that done now. So we did make some assessments way earlier than we normally would have. And we tried to explain all that. Not sure if we did a great job with that. Always give my water. I tend to choke up when I get in front of this group for some reason. Yeah, I get emotional. That's what it is. Excuse me. But Bjorn, any questions you've got about the process, man? I mean, I'm glad to sit down and walk through things with you. All this stuff that we've provided and presented is it's available. It's open to you guys. It's open to the public, and can try to help you better understand how to where we got to where we are today.
All right, any more questions or discussion? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you again for coming today to share some additional information with this group.
Thank you.
Okay, moving into our business items, and we have many. We're going to start with Travis. And he's going to share information and ask us for an action on the 2026-2035 TIP development process.
Hey everyone, Travis Johnson here with the CRTPO. I got two items for you. So I'm going to first go into latest developments in the P 7.0 process, and then we'll talk about complete streets policy in a minute. Today I want to talk about the 2026-2035 TIP development process and come to you for an action requested to recommend that the CRTPO board open a public comment period on the draft list of division needs projects proposed for local input points assignment under NCDOT prioritization 7.0. So I want to go over a brief update we received from NCDOT's spot office about available funding and our regional impact list. Then we'll just briefly go over the process to create the division needs list, talk about the public comment period and next steps for the project. So we received an update on the 23rd that shared with us an updated list of P 7.0 regional impact scores and projects that were funded through that process. As we were aware, we had negative numbers in one of our regions, and then I think it was the maximum of $8 million in the other region. So not as much of a surprise, but we did not have any projects move from our regional impact list into a funded list. So all the projects that were submitted with local input points were not added to P 7.0. For the division needs local input point assignment, that window is going to began on September 23rd and then will end on November 29th. And we also received updated funding availability for each of the divisions. And so our updated number for Division 10 is negative $201 million. And for Division 12 is negative $128 million. So those numbers have been modified from the original estimates. So for division needs, so the P 7.0 subcommittee met on August 28th. We allocated local input points to the division needs projects. There was a recommendation not to allocate local input points to the cascaded regional impact projects. So essentially make all of the regional impact projects eligible then for local input points. This aligned with NCDOT Division 10 and 12 and their desire not to add local input points to those projects. And then also there was concern about confusion of essentially asking for the same projects for local input points again. But beyond this, not adding to cascaded regional impact projects, we followed the CRTPO methodology, and the draft spreadsheets are included in the agenda packet. For the public comment period, if approved by the CRTPO board and recommended from this group, we would start it on October 17th and conclude it on October 31st. The public involvement period would include us doing a press release announcing the public comment period. We would send it to local media outlets in English and Spanish. Media outlets in all three counties. We would also announce it at the board, TCC, and public information officers for all of our member jurisdictions. And again, we ask that you share that with your communities. We'd also share it with all the members of our EJ community database, which is a database we have created as we've done public engagement for the MTP and other planning documents. We'd make social media posts on Facebook and Twitter. Also included in the newsletter this month, and we can keep incorporating this information in our newsletters and announcements. We'd also announce the public comment period on crtpo.org and make sure that it is available to use the translation services we have made available on the website that allows the text to be translated into different languages. And we also would include that as a slider on the main page. And so again, once we make the announcement, we just ask that you share this with your community and make sure you help us get the word out as much as possible. So if it recommended by the board, we'd open a public comment period. It would conclude on October 31st. We would then come back for action in November 7th TCC meeting, and then go to the board for action. At the conclusion of that meeting, we would then add it into the local input spot database. And that would satisfy the requirements for local input points for those division needs and regional impact and keep us on the timeline to receive our draft project lists in January of 2025. So with that, the action requested is to recommend that the CRTPO board open a public comment period on the draft list of division needs projects proposed for local input points under NCDOT prioritization 7.0, and I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Travis? All right, then with that, may I have a motion to recommend that the CRTPO board open a public comment period on the draft list of division needs projects proposed for local input points assignment under NCDOT prioritization 7.0.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. And we're on to you again. So Travis is going to give us an update, and we'll take action on the complete streets policy.
Travis Johnson again. We're going to talk about the complete streets policy. The action requested today is to recommend that CRTPO board open a public comment period in the draft CRTPO complete streets policy to solicit feedback. And then come back the following month for action. So I want to talk about the background of the policy, talk about our draft policy creation, then talk about next steps. So again, complete streets is a process and approach to street design. It's not one solution. It's a process of looking at all the different users of a street and consider projects. CRTPO is committed to ensuring all roadway users are accommodated throughout our region, and the CRTPO Complete Streets policy will help further refine the organization's commitment to complete streets. So again, it's looking at a street that's predominantly focused on vehicular movement and helping to rethink that into something that's more applicable for all users. So North Carolina Department of Transportation adopted the latest version of their Complete Streets policy in 2019. The CRTPO started doing research on its policy in early of 2024, and we interviewed peer regional planning agencies, MPOs. We spoke with Smart Growth America, and we've just been looking at how regional planning agencies have implemented complete streets due to the unique nature in which we exist compared to a local municipality or a county doing those level complete streets policies. So for the draft policy is included in your agenda. We did a policy review at the June 6th and July 11th bicycle pedestrian work group. We brought it forth at the July 31st transportation staff meeting. We met with Smart Growth America on August 2nd, August 29th. And we brought this originally for review on the September 5th and September 18th TCC and CRTPO board meeting. And so we're still looking for feedback and again, opening the public comment period. We still would like to hear if you see something, ideas for improvement or find things that need to be recommendations for improving the policy. We want to make sure that we have the most or the best policy we can have for the MPO. The complete streets policy is going to be seen more as a way to complement local complete streets policies. So we're still encouraging our member jurisdictions to adopt their own complete streets policy because again, you can get into more refined tools for how they can improve in your area. So example, you can address land use issues, development requirements, and you can define local priorities better than we can as an MPO and beyond what our authority is. So this is not you can use this policy as your policy, but we still would encourage you to develop your own complete streets policy so you can have the more refined look. We also see this as a policy to help further support NCDOT's complete streets efforts, identifying these complete streets elements earlier on in the process, especially as we start moving to CTP 2.0. We just want to make sure that all these elements have been thought about and agreed upon before we work through the process of our MTP and the TIP, and just so we don't get to the end and we get a facility that we find would be more, would be a better solution for some of the issues we might face. And as further you go in the process, that kind of changes what funding may be available and what would be covered through the STIP or TIP process versus what would be available funding on a local level. The policy reviewed regularly with the MTP. So we're recommending that this would then be reviewed every time the MTP is reviewed. And we may review it beyond that, but we would just would guarantee this policy be reviewed with every MTP. And this policy would not affect project scoring. So all highway projects first submitted to the CRTPO would be reviewed for complete streets elements, but there was not like a point associated with this. It's not like extra points or anything of that nature. So for next steps, we complete the information steps. So here we're coming to ask to open a public comment period. So if approved by the CRTP or if recommended by this group and then approved by the CRTPO board, this would happen concurrently with the local input point assignment division needs comment period. And then we'd come back in November for adoption. So again, for the public involvement plan, this would be a press release. We release out the same as we've stated earlier, social media posts, newsletter, and then announce on the CRTPO website. And also, again, we would encourage you to share this among your jurisdiction and get the word out on it. And so again, open public comment period, close public comment period, and come back in November for action. So with that, the recommendation, or we're asked that you recommend that the CRTPO board open a public comment period on the draft CRTPO complete streets policy. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Travis? All right, may I have a motion to recommend that the CRTPO board open a public comment period on the draft CRTPO complete streets policy?
So moved.
In a second,
Second.
got it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. Next, we're going to hear from Brian, and we'll take action on the strategic plan goal 5 implementation.
Good morning. My name is Brian Elbert. I'm the project implementation coordinator for the CRTPO, and today I am returning for action on some of our implementation efforts related to the strategic plan. So I'm here requesting 2 pieces of action. The first is to recommend that the CRTPO board dissolve the project oversight committee effective after the development of the recommended project list for the 2024 fall call for projects. The second action is to recommend that the CRTPO board approve 7 updates to the discretionary grants program policy guide. As a little bit of background, in 2024, the CRTPO really focused on goal 5 of our strategic plan, which is all about operations and continuously improving them to fulfill our mission and vision, which are up here on the screen. Under that goal, we really looked at 2 specific strategies, which were organizational efficiency improvements and evaluating our committees and working groups. Internally, the project oversight committee was identified as sort of the top priority for evaluation. And I am coming today with 4 recommended updates to go into effect after the 2024 fall call process has been completed. These recommended updates were presented to the project oversight committee in August, and they did not have any objections or concerns. Recommendation 1 is to have project managers representing our member jurisdictions conduct annual presentations on their active discretionary grants program projects. These will happen during CRTPO transportation staff meetings. CRTPO staff will provide a PowerPoint template and we'll work with our members to make sure that you guys have your presentations developed in time. And it will be a requirement for each jurisdiction that has an active project to conduct their annual presentation, or they will be ineligible for the ensuing call for projects. We hope that these presentations increase communication amongst jurisdiction staff about current and ongoing projects and helps improve member understanding of regional planning projects and issues. This is our proposed presentation schedule. So Charlotte and Fairview would be up in January of 2025. For example, transportation staff meetings are hosted virtually through Zoom by the CRTPO each week, Wednesday at 2:00 p.m. So that offers a couple of different options each month for when our members can present. The presentation should be given by project manager or a knowledgeable representative of the lead applicant. You can obviously team with NCDOT for your presentation as appropriate. The templates will be pretty simple. There will be a title slide, a slide that has the list of active projects, and then for each project, there will be 3 content slides. 2 of them will pull from the application itself, and then the third will be a takeaway slide. And then the presentation will culminate with a list of completed projects from the past 12 months. Based off this assignment, it would carry forward. So for example, Davidson and Troutman will always present in June moving forward. Recommendation 2 is a planning project application process improvement. CRTPO staff leading the Regional Transportation Planning Program, or RTPP, will manage the planning project application and review process moving forward. This is to ensure that projects align with the CRTPO's plans, programming, and priorities, including adhering to relevant federal regulations. The RTPP staff will lead the pre-submittal meetings for planning projects, as well as review those applications. In turn, staff will be able to provide more technical support on these projects. And we really hope that this will encourage more integration and implementation of recommendations from CRTPO plans directly into local plans. Recommendation 3 is an efficiency improvement for the discretionary grants program. Effective next year, we are recommending the elimination of the spring shortfall call for projects and moving forward with a single annual call for both new project and shortfall project applications during the fall. We are calling this the annual discretionary grants call. And it's important to note that the current fall call process already allows for shortfall project applications. We just feel that condensing the two calls into one will create a complete pool of applications for the TCC and the board to review and have a more holistic picture when it comes time to assign funds to different modes and project phases. We also believe that this will reduce administrative burden for our members and our partner agencies like NCDOT. Our fourth recommendation is that the CRTPO board should dissolve the project oversight committee. The discretionary grants program policy guide has created a process that no longer requires a dedicated TCC subcommittee to administer. Transportation staff meetings and TCC would serve as the forums of discussion for the discretionary grants program moving forward. The discretionary grants program recommended project list for the annual call will be developed in TCC work sessions, and I'll go over those in a second. And the TCC vice chair will continue to lead the process. This is to, again, go into effect after the POC has developed the recommended project list for the 2024 fall call. The work sessions will be open to all TCC members, and we hope that by eliminating some of the steps in the process, it will make it clearer and prevent any instances of confusion. So these TCC work sessions will be scheduled for the same days as the regularly scheduled December and January TCC meetings. You'll have calendar holds for 11:30 to 1:30, but they'll start 20 minutes after the TCC meeting ends. If the regular TCC meeting is canceled for any reason, other than severe weather or things that would prevent travel, the work session would start at the normal TCC start time, 10 o'clock. And the January work session is only if needed. If we get everything done during the December work session, January will be canceled. All TCC members are invited and encouraged to attend and take part. And again, this process will be led by the TCC vice chair in accordance with the policy. CRTPO staff will be present and available to provide support and answer questions as needed, and will provide a packet of relevant information for all attendees ahead of the meeting. So you have your scores, you know how the projects were evaluated, and have all that at your fingertips before the discussion starts. This is an overview of what the new annual discretionary grants call process schedule will look like. The items in orange are the only items that have changed from the current fall call process. So in November, applicants will present on their projects to transportation staff meeting rather than to the project oversight committee. In December and January, the TCC will develop the recommended project list in work sessions rather than the POC and POC meetings. And then we're also recommending that the recommended project list go to the TCC and board for information and action in February and March rather than January and February, to help alleviate some tightness of agenda in the January meetings, and also just give more appropriate spacing for evaluation. Staff is confident this won't impact us getting tip amendments to NCDOT or anything like that. The discretionary grants program policy guide text updates are largely clerical updates to match these recommendations, and they were documented in detail in a memorandum provided to y'all in your agenda packet. It's things like removing mentions of the project oversight committee. We wanted to identify the TCC work sessions as the forum for determining the recommended project list. We removed mentions of the spring shortfall call, and then we updated the funding timeline/schedule. I want to reiterate, for the planning project application process, the evaluation process is unchanged. The application has been slightly revised just to reorder some of the questions and reformat them. And again, our TPP staff will lead the pre-submittal meetings and application review moving forward. This is a summary of the 4 recommended updates. So we have the annual project status presentations, RTPP staff handling the planning project applications, eliminating the spring shortfall call, and dissolving the Project Oversight Committee. So I'll put the actions back up on screen. Again, we are asking that the TCC recommend that the board dissolve the Project Oversight Committee, as well as approve the 7 updates to the policy. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Brian? All right. You have a question, Heather?
No, just a comment on the page where you outline the schedule, Weddington's on there twice. So I don't know if that's the final schedule, but.
Got it. I will make sure to remove them. They should only be on there once.
Thank you. All right, may I have a motion to recommend that the CRTPO board dissolve the Project Oversight Committee effective after the development of the recommended project list for the 2024 fall call for projects, and that the board approve the 7 updates to the discretionary grants program policy guide?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. And I will just make a real quick comment. I want to thank those members of the POC for all of the hard work that they've done, and particularly under Andrew's leadership and with Jennifer's support. I think we can all agree that there's been tremendous improvements over the last several years in the way that program works. So thank you. All right, Judy, welcome. Judy's going to give us some information and we'll take action on the CRTPO Title VI and Limited English Proficiency Plan.
Yes. Good morning and thank you for having me. Real quick before I start with Title VI, I just want to mention last month I gave you the summary of our fiscal year 24 public engagement. And today we have our annual reports here. So if you didn't pick one up on your way coming in, please grab one on your way out, because it looks really good and we want to show that off. So, and it highlights a lot of the great things that we did last year. So just wanted to now announce that real quick. So the Title VI and Limited English Proficiency Plan, 2 months ago, I came to you with an information item and we opened a public comment period. That comment period has closed. So now we're asking that you recommend that the board adopt the updated plan. And just as a quick refresher, we update the plan to ensure that our plans are all like non-discrimination in our plans and programs, and that we provide meaningful access to public involvement to everyone in our member jurisdictions. We use the 2020 census and the 2022 5-year American Community Survey data. FHWA and NCDOT reviewed the plan and provided some comments, and we have addressed those and incorporated them into the document. And I'm going to cover some of those in a minute. And in our public comment period, we didn't receive any from the general public. So first thing we had to update in our plan based on comments we received is we didn't have the executive order 14096 in there. This was something Biden signed in 2023. So we've included that. It expands on the public engagement and it added tribal affiliation and disabilities to the EJ definition. We also clarified in our plan about our EJ analysis that we use CRTPO's degree of impact methodology. That's the same methodology we use for the MTP, and also added a little bit on how we use qualitative data, such as the job access, traffic safety. We want job safety too. And so we also clarified about the demographics because we include a little bit more than what's just EJ related. EJ is minority and low income, but we also include persistent poverty populations and carless households and limited English proficiency. And we include those because those are part of the demographics that we evaluate with the MTP. So to keep both kind of consistent, we're going to continue to do that. And the last thing that we had to clarify in there is on this race and ethnicity table, it does add up to a little bit more than 100%. And that is because the Hispanic, Latino, and white aggregate populations overlap some. And so therefore that total is over 100%. And with that, I ask that you recommend that the CRTPO board adopt the updated CRTPO Title VI and Limited English Proficiency Plan.
Thank you, Judy. Are there any questions? All right, may I have a motion to recommend that the CRTPO board adopt the updated CRTPO Title VI and English and Limited English Proficiency Plan? May I have a motion? Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
All right, our next item on the agenda, we're going to hear from James. And he's going to ask for action on the Waxhaw Parkway CTP amendment.
Thank you. I am Matt Hubert, the Director of Engineering. Wanted to provide a little bit of a historical context to frame the amendment before James goes into the data. And I'll just take a very short few minutes to do so. Again, the action requested is to approve the proposed facility alignment that was brought forward previously in the information session. And I did want to kind of go over exactly what we're up against on the ground, and I don't see a pointer. I didn't think about that. So apologize for the bad resolution. But this is the intersection that we're talking about. And basically in 1889, right, the forward thinkers of at the time built a cutting edge railroad and a modest crossroads here at what would create Waxhaw. I don't know what the horse counts per day were, but by all accounts, it was a safe and effective facility at the time. So what we're dealing with now is 15,000 and moving into the horizon years, 20,000 cars a day are making this predominant north-south, east-west movement through town. 67% commuter traffic from our OD study. And the first thing they get to is they've got a crosswalk here between our North Main Street businesses. Then the railroad tracks go up and down. So you got to create the gap for the railroad itself. Then you got to go up and down before you navigate a turn, which again has another crosswalk for the South Main pedestrians. Then you navigate that turn and there's parking on this side. And then you hit another crosswalk for our pedestrian bridge, which is a historic structure and is the safest way for pedestrians to get over the tracks themselves. And that's essentially what the bottleneck is and has been since the 135 years of this intersection. So if we fast forward, basically the amendment itself is limited to the technical merits of the feasibility alignment A that James will show and the current alignment B. Both the current alignment is on the CTP and has been for a number of years. That process is complete. As far as bringing forward the amendment, the data is compelling, and in my professional opinion, the new alignment is the one that should move forward with the unanimous recommendation from the committee. So lately, Union County and Mineral Springs have provided that their boards are directing them to vote for removal of the entire corridor. In the context of this amendment, that amounts to abstaining from a vote at all. In my opinion and my interpretation. We spent a lot of time and money establishing goals for improving transportation safety, reducing congestion, and improving air quality. Then we spend more time setting metrics and ways to measure and report how we are achieving these goals. To prove this effort is of value to the taxpayer, right? Here we have a facility that in every technical metric can achieve those goals without question. For me, how is this not a slam dunk for the country, the state, and the region? And I'll admit, Bjorn is an effective and responsible member of the committee, right? He's our process guy. He supports this body and holds us to our own standards which have been met by us to the letter. So for him to now stray from that, how can he propose the corridor be removed without compelling public engagement, without any technical analysis to honor this process? This sets up deferring to political will in what is essentially a technical setting. And the cherry on top is that this is his amendment in the first place. In the 30 years I've lived and served within Union County, first for Monroe, and then in the past 7 for Waxhaw, CRTPO and DOT has made its long-range decisions around this. To consider any removal based on speculation upends that and puts decades of MPO and CRTPO effort and hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars in the shredder. Not to mention the irreparable damage it will do to safety and quality of life in the region. My request is that we rely on our professional expertise our duty to our professional licensures or certifications, and recommend what our experience tells us is the best option with no further delay. I would like to send a message to the board that this is what the data tells us. Let's actually plan and engineer in this critical opportunity given to us and provide a 21st century facility to replace a 19th century one. And with that, I'll let James do the numbers.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Matt, for that introduction and context. That dives into the big picture here, right? Which is this was originally on adopted plan since 1991. It's been over 30 years since this conceptual plan has been in place. And Matt has already talked about the constraints, and we've already mentioned that before, as far as the NC route designation. So with that particular, in accordance with general statute, you would have to design for the WB 62FL turning movement, which is an interstate semi-trailer. And those turning movements with a dual left turn and dual receiving lane would impact historical properties in CSX right-of-way, which are which are very significant challenges to overcome. I've highlighted just the overarching pictures here. At the informational session from the board meeting, it was pointed out that the Northwest Corridor is important, and yes, it is. I will confirm that that Northwest Corridor is important, and the OD study supports not only the Northwest, but the Northeast and the Southeast, noting that the OD study says that the Northeast component is the most vital to alleviating congestion and improving regional mobility. So there has been a lot of focus on the Southwest component here, and that was mentioned at the CRTPO informational session. As of right now, that segment is not feasible due to a multitude of reasons. Number one, you would have to go through another community engagement amendment for that, because there was a subdivision that was approved in unincorporated Union County, and that would have been a great opportunity to initiate that process. That's a missed opportunity there. Moving on to recent CTP amendment history. Again, this project dates back over 30 years, and the goal of this project is to minimize impacts, alleviate congestion, and to improve regional mobility. Back in 2018, you can see that this amendment has been going on for nearly 7 years as of now. 2018, there was public engagement that ultimately led to a 2022 NCDOT feasibility study, which recommended alternative alignments. And that's what we're proposing, is that alternative alignment amendment. And that new alignment does indicate decreased impacts and opportunities to minimize harm from a human, physical, and environmental perspective. Continuing into the 2023 Origin Destination Study, this was from a CRTPO planning grant, which identified the alignment as best suited to accommodate this predominant north-south regional traffic. Again, this traffic is regional. Over 2/3 of the traffic within the OD study are regional trips and regional traffic, primarily moving from South Carolina, the Lancaster area in particular, north to Charlotte, and east to Monroe. Union County did initiate a 2023 public engagement process, and that process followed CRTPO's public engagement guidelines. And from that public engagement, a new alignment was identified. The new alignment that we've identified received majority public support. And the town of Waxhaw, in addition to that, conducted further public engagement as part of its 2024 Master Transportation Plan, which reinforced support for the project. I will also note that CRTPO also completed its 2055 public engagement as well, and it is noted within there that there was support for the project as well. So now you have 3 separate public engagements that all show that there's majority and overwhelming support in some cases for the project. Furthermore, as we move to the draft local points for the public comment for P 7.0, it is noted on there that the Waxhaw Parkway is likely to receive those local points through that process. Regardless of whatever alignment is selected, we must realize that this is the CTP. This is a planning level stage of the process. Waxhaw does intend to submit the project for 2055 MTP consideration in January to advance the project programming to ultimately move toward the STIP. At the CR2PO informational session on September 18th, we had some community members reach out for need for increased transparency. So what this was provided to you before the full feasibility report was within your agenda packets, just highlighting a few of those sections. So section 2 within the feasibility report shows the purpose and need for the project. Again, the purpose of the project is to alleviate congestion and provide regional mobility, with the understanding that this is a technical preliminary scoping report and preliminary document within the initial step of the planning and design process. I will note within that document, there was an express design traffic analysis conducted, which showed that without the project programmed, if we project out to year 2045 based upon the model, multiple intersections along the NC 16 corridor will reach a level of service of F without the project. In addition, within the recommendations in section 6 of the feasibility report, there was notes that Union County and municipalities supported the Waxhaw project and even went further to recommend a concept, which is the Northeast Amendment. And this was based on local input from both the town of Waxhaw, Union County, and Mineral Springs. Continuing the need for increased transparency and highlighting some of the key outcomes from the OD study. Waxhaw Parkway provides, this is within section 4 of the Origin Destination Report, which shows that the Waxhaw Parkway provides important infrastructure to support local circulation and regional trips. Again, implementation of the northeast segment of the Waxhaw Parkway is expected to have the largest influence in reducing vehicle trips in downtown Waxhaw. It's further noted within the OD report that incremental additional reductions in vehicles throughout the downtown Waxhaw core are expected with construction of the primary 3, the northwest, the northeast, and the southeast components. Again, there was consideration of alternative alignments for the northeast and southeast segments, and really the general trend has been shifting closer to downtown Waxhaw to support these north-south travel patterns. And really, with the combination of the OD study and the feasibility report, and the previous alignments considered over the past 30 years, we've looked at over 20 plus alternatives for this route. And we have agreed, as documented within the feasibility report, which concept is most optimal. And that is the amendment that we're talking about today. Just providing more transparency as far as public engagement. This was outlined within my memo that was provided within your agenda packet. Again, the first public engagement process was initiated by Union County via MetroQuest. Mailings were sent to all affected properties within 300 feet of both the current and the proposed alignments. We had over 400 responses to the survey with over 50 attendees at the meeting. In addition to that, we also received letters of support from our chief of police, the fire chief, as well as our downtown Waxhaw Business Association for the project. Key takeaways from the Union County initiated engagement was that majority public support was achieved for the proposed CTP amendments and to build the Waxhaw Parkway. I will note there was some split public feedback from those who are directly impacted, and that's to be expected. Further outlining some more highlights, just increasing that transparency. Again, this was all outlined within my memo within your agenda packet. It really shows that this project is a vital infrastructure need, and reducing congestion at the intersection of 16 and 75 is really the whole point of this project, to alleviate that regional congestion to improve regional mobility. And really the Waxhaw Parkway would be the next logical step to advancing the already programmed NC 16 widening project. Furthermore, the Parkway would help to increase safety by improving emergency response times and mitigating railroad conflicts, advancing our bicycle, multimodal, and pedestrian facilities connections, encouraging economic development along planned employment corridors, both within the Waxhaw 2040 plan and within the Union County 2050 plan, and providing a feasible transportation solution to address local and regional traffic demands. Now, I will note that also from the public engagement, there were some key questions raised in particular regarding environmental impacts. Realize that, again, this is just a scoping report. This is a preliminary document. It's not an exhaustive process. So if the candidate project is identified within the STIP, the project scoping report is then followed by the NEPA and SEPA requirements. We did get a few comments on right-of-way acquisition and that process. It's noted that right-of-way acquisition would follow the Uniform Act of 1970. And we did get further comments as far as development inquiries. I will note that it's reasonable to assume that additional growth will occur regardless of whether the parkway is constructed. And we note that all development must be consistent with adopted plans and standards. Furthermore, there's questions on the OD study. Again, that goes back to the 2/3 of the traffic within our core, our regional trips. The Waxhaw Parkway would help to alleviate the congestion, improve safety, preserve the historical properties, and provide a downtown atmosphere that prioritizes the pedestrian over vehicular traffic. We did get multiple questions. Well, have you considered other alternatives, other alternative alignments? Yes, we've considered over 20 alternative alignments. Multiple alignments have been considered since 1991. The Waxhaw Parkway must balance being close to Waxhaw while minimizing impacts on existing areas. So here's the amendment. This orange line over here crossing Snow White Field Road is the current alignment that's on the CTP today. The purple is the Northeast Amendment, and the green is the Southeast Amendment. So really, again, this is vital to alleviating the regional choke point at the intersection of 16 and 75, with an ultimate future vision to designate the purple route as the future NC 16. The Northeast Amendment, the purple route, was based on the 2022 feasibility study that identified the need to alleviate congestion and improve regional mobility. And this was a concept that was agreed, and it's a documented solution where the 3 municipalities did support that concept. The Southeast Amendment is based upon the OD study that showed the need for regional traffic to accommodate for regional traffic demands. Again, more than 2/3 of all the traffic around Waxhaw coming to and from Waxhaw is regional. And providing this predominant north-south movement would accommodate for those regional trips. So highlighting the particular area of contention, which is from this map, if I were to zoom in here to this particular area, which is this multi-jurisdictional area, you can see that in green, everything that's Waxhaw's jurisdiction or sphere of influence. Waxhaw actually owns the property here between the railroad track and 75. We own those parcels. The red is Town of Mineral Springs, which these two properties were recently annexed throughout this process by the Town of Mineral Springs. And the white is unincorporated Union County. So we know that this is a regional issue that is finalized through the CTP procedural amendment process, which is what we're coming to an end to now. We know that data supports the proposed purple and green amendments as being more effective and less impactful than the current orange alignment. I will also note that at the CRTPO informational session in September, there was some property owners that showed up for public comment. All of those property owners are located along the existing alignment. So some final considerations as we move to action is that remember that our goal as transportation professionals and planners is to seek opportunities to minimize harm to human, physical, and natural environments while maximizing, in our case, maximizing congestion reduction and improving the safety of our transportation network for not just the vehicles, but for all roadway users. And we do support collaboration and cooperation to enhance these local and regional planning efforts. I will also note that the Town of Waxhaw, Mineral Springs, and Union County are meeting next Friday. With that said, though, that does not interfere with this technical recommendation. And of course, we must consider public input and whole community sentiment. So yes, a lot of the times, public input is viewed as a representation of the entire community. Public input sentiment, that is. And that's not true. There's studies that show that public input matches whole community sentiment approximately only 5% of the time. So as we look at the 3 primary engagements that we've had, from the Union County initiated, the Waxhaw initiated, and the CRTPO MTP, 2055 MTP public comments, we can see from all of those engagements, there is support for the project. So the scope of the vote is essentially this. Option A, which is yes to amend, which would amend the CTP to the northeast and southeast amendments that were shown in purple and green. The purple being based upon the 2022 feasibility report, the green being based upon the OD study. There was majority public support achieved for this amendment. And this is likely the more effective and less impactful approach that supports opportunities to minimize those human, physical, and natural environment harm. I will note that if Union County and the town of Mineral Springs continue to oppose this, this will require a 3/4 supermajority vote when we move to CRTPO to approve the amendment. Option B is essentially, no, we're not going to do the amendment, which would keep the existing orange line. And we know that public support is not favorable for the current alignment. And this alignment is likely less effective and more impactful. And it's less likely to support opportunities to minimize harm. And you're likely to expect increased costs as we move into additional study and project programming. Option C, you could abstain. I will note that in accordance with the bylaws, abstentions are considered affirmative votes. And of course, all other actions outside of this must conform with Robert's Rules of Order. To conclude, remember that this alignment is already on the CTP. This really just continues the discussion to an optimal plan, and nothing is set in stone here. So even if we do amend, it is always possible that the alignment could shift again. While the CTP could change again, though, this would require a restart of the CTP procedural amendment process with added public engagement and consultant procurement for additional feasibility study. So with that, the action requested is to recommend that the CRTPO board approve the proposed amendments for the northeast and southeast quadrants of the Waxhaw Parkway.
Thank you. Before we go into questions, I'd like to ask for a point of parliamentary inquiry and clarify the voting options that are before us. If you could go back to that previous slide. So Travis, will you help me with that? Thank you.
Yeah, so just to clarify that if the motion is first, if it receives a motion and a second, then we could discuss the motion at hand. At the time during that, the motion is under discussion. You do have the option to postpone definitely. So you could postpone for a certain reason. You could postpone indefinitely. You could also, there's the vote of an abstain vote is an abstain vote. However, as stated in our TCC bylaws, it states that it would be considered a yay vote. And then I don't think we have any other option, or I think that covers everything we would have as an option. Right.
All right, thank you. Okay, open it up for questions.
Take a motion before you take questions or no?
You can ask questions about the presentation now. Once a motion is called, then you may debate the motion being discussed, and only the motion being discussed, unless an alternative motion is put forth.
Thank you for the question.
My question was procedural. So at one point for abstentions, we had to vote to authorize someone to abstain. That I am assuming that is not correct anymore. And this might have been under MUMPO.
Stand by.
Okay, and we can continue on while you figure that out.
We thought we were ready.
Yeah.
But maybe
So section 6 voting procedure, a majority vote of members or their authorized alternatives present and eligible in the vote shall be sufficient for approval of matters coming before the TCC. The chairperson is permitted to vote. Non-voting members and unauthorized alternatives cannot vote. Abstentions shall be considered as affirmative votes. By approval of the voting members of the TCC, a voting member may be allowed to withdraw from voting on an issue. Yeah. In the absence pursuant of any direction from these bylaws or other duly adopted voting procedure pursuant to certain approval actions, the most current edition of Robert Rules of Order will designate procedure governing voting.
That I was thinking of.
Okay.
So I have a question. So I assume Union County is gonna have some opposition. Would they discuss it now, or would they wait for a motion? And then they would have that, we would have that discussion.
So now is the time to ask questions about the information that was presented. Then once a motion was passed, or once a motion was active, we could then discuss the motion, but we can't ask questions and share information at this time because that is our tradition.
I have a question on the timeliness of this. So can you help me understand? Maybe I missed, like, why is it essential we vote on this today versus a continuation? Are you working it out and coming back before us?
Great question. So the goal is to gain some consensus, whether it be for the proposed amendment or the existing alignment, to really move toward to MTP submittal.
I have a question. I attended the last board meeting when you presented this for information, and I didn't see any reflection of that conversation and some of the feedback that they gave you. You did mention that you do have a meeting scheduled next Friday. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that and why why you are asking for action from this board today in advance of that discussion?
That's another great question. So really remember, this is a technical recommendation. So the technical recommendation does not impact our particular discussions that we're having internally with Waxhaw, Union County, and Mineral Springs. This is really a technical recommendation to either support the amendment or to not support, which would essentially be supporting the current alignment. As far as timing, again, to provide more information there, that meeting is held next week, Friday. And we'll see what results come out of that meeting. From a technical perspective, though, our technical recommendation would not impact that discussion.
Any more questions? Go ahead. Did we do that in advance? All right, we're discussing procedure.
I have one
Go
question.
ahead.
Could you please just remind us of the timeline of how we got from the previous alignment to the proposal to to amend it for the new alignment?
Sure. So again, this originally goes back to 2018, the 2018 public comments, which were essentially saying the same thing that we are today, which is that the current alignment is not the most optimal alignment. So with that said, the three jurisdictions worked with DOT to develop this 2022 feasibility study to recommend various alternatives. There was an alternative identified within the feasibility report, which is the Northeast Amendment. And all three jurisdictions did agree with that particular amendment. And then as we moved throughout the remainder of the process, through 2023, we had a lot of public comment. This decision was supposed to be made on this last November. Here it is a year later, and we're still not at a conclusion. And this is really resulting in increased confusion from the property owners that could be impacted within this area. So we're really looking to finalize this process because it is a procedural amendment process. And we do have guidelines for that process. And it's been over a year since the last action was supposed to be held. Great question.
What is the goal of the meeting for the three jurisdictions? And is it staff or elected officials or both?
It's both. So it will be a combination of staff and elected officials. The goal of the meeting is to foster more collaboration and to really work through the documented solution that we've already identified, to make sure everybody is on the same page. And then whatever comes of that meeting, that is ultimately up to the CRTPO board.
And I'll add a little bit more clarity to that. And to Liz's point is when we were engaging in the information session, Union County and Mineral Springs were bringing in kind of more speculative reasons as to why we should not consider this whole corridor as a whole, which wasn't really the purpose of the amendment in the first place. And they also weren't really offering any other space to go to. And so short of that, we didn't really know how to really respond to that. And now finally, I think because of that kind of consideration, they realized that there had to be some ability for us to know where to move to next and not just leave us in this limbo. And I think that's what we're hoping to find out from them is where can we find out what is a place for us to get to that still accomplishes the purpose, but maybe meets the expectations of the county and Mineral Springs better.
Okay, I guess I'm a little confused about this because you're talking about you're having a meeting with Union County and the other jurisdiction, which is Wesley Mineral Springs. And so out of that meeting could come an alternative alignment, which would mean you would have to go back through this process. So if that's the case, why are we voting on this process today?
The reason why we are voting on this today is because this is the documented solution that's been agreed to over the past, well, really since 2022 feasibility report came out. That is the solution that we're discussing. Now, if there is an option that Union County or Mineral Springs would like to bring forward at a later point in time, that's fine. They would have to restart the public engagement process in accordance with the CTP procedural amendment guidelines.
So you're basically saying, irregardless of this meeting, Waxaw's ramrodding this alignment through to the Cartwell board.
No, this is really to just finalize, to get some consensus on the alignment. Remember, the alignment can always change again.
Well, if the alignment's going to change after your meeting, why are we voting on this today? Why can't we wait till after the meeting?
We don't
It makes
know.
no sense to me. You
We
can
really
put it
don't know
however you
if the
want.
alignment's going to change, but what makes as much little sense to us is they want to consider just removing, that's what they want to do. Their resolutions are to remove the corridor altogether.
Well, it can't be removed
Right,
unless they
right.
bring that forward.
Exactly. And so again, lacking any technical reason to not vote on the feasibility really puts us in the same spot. So the term ramrod can be used on both sides of the equation here. And that's why at the technical side, there are no questions, right? The math is done. And it's just a matter of, from that standpoint, is the shorter, less intrusive alignment better than the current one? And in our opinion, it is. And I think the data supports that. As far as the politicizing of it all, that's another beast altogether and not necessarily an issue for the technical committee, something to be worked out. And again, it's really brought them to the table by doing this. If we kind of let it languish, then this thing happens indefinitely. It can't move to the MTP. It just sits out there as this awkward egg when we know the region needs it. It's been 30 years. We're still 20 years away from actually project delivery. So DOT knows this has to happen. The town knows it has to happen. The future is coming, whether we sit here and debate what the municipalities have or don't have to say about it, right?
No, it's a line on a map that's asking to be changed. So either the Cartwell board votes to change the line on the map or the current line on the map stays. I just don't know if they're going back to the table to open up more discussions on this, why it's so imperative to vote on this line if that line could change after this meeting. That's all I'm asking. I don't think that's, unless I don't understand something correctly. I mean, why don't we wait till next month after this meeting happens and see if that line changed? You would have to go back through the process anyway with notifying property owners. So I guess maybe, am I missing something?
So from this perspective, right, we know that the property owners are not supportive of the current alignment. And we do know that majority public support and overwhelming support in some cases was shown for the proposed amendment. So my question would be, why would we not vote from this from a technical perspective? Because from a technical perspective, this really is a no-brainer.
I would say.
That's for the CRTPO of delegates and representation to discuss further as far as how they want to approach the issue at the CRTPO board meeting.
So let me see if I can move this along. I appreciate the discussion and some of the questions. I think we are at a point now where, and again, we can make a motion and continue the discussion about the action. And so this is what I would like to do is ask, may I have a motion to recommend that the CRTPO board approve the proposed comprehensive transportation plan amendments for the northeast and southeast quadrants of the Waxhaw Parkway?
So moved.
May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Now, may we have some further discussion about the action before us?
Question.
Well, it's not just the counties. It really,
Everyone's.
we started from Mineral Springs position and essentially sided with them. You had the resolution process fall of 23 for moving forward based on the public comment period. And yes, we coordinated it. It was a consensus agreement that this needed to go forward. We weren't going to have a universe of options out there to confuse the property owners that there was something on the CTP, but there was a mysterious study out there that had a different alignment. So we recommended that the CTP be amended. We didn't take action last fall. We tabled it waiting on the results of the election last fall because we thought there might be a change in Waxhaw's leadership. And so then our board took action this spring and it was not unanimous. I think it was 3-2, maybe 4-1 to side essentially with Mineral Springs, citing their concerns over inducing additional development and looking at alternative, more tactical improvements that could be made closer into Waxhaw to address the congestion. Until a few months ago, I was a resident of downtown Waxhaw. I'm very aware of this intersection and the need to improve throughput. But the concerns of the county are over the induced development that would occur along the east side of Waxhaw, going into Mineral Springs, going into unincorporated Union County. And so the Board of Commissioners, we were kind of all locked up. And in terms of what happens next, we were hoping that there would be a meeting that would be proposed. None happened. James and I got together, found out that Mineral Springs and Waxhaw were going to meet. We asked to be a part of that. That occurred in the last 6 days, 7 days maybe. So the meeting got scheduled for next Friday. I have no idea what will come out of it. The fact that Mineral Springs is attending and they've really been the standard bearer for the position of concerns over development and the best use of limited DOT dollars. The fact that they're willing to attend gives us some hope that something can come about from this meeting. And that's really all I can say. I mean, we would hope that this would be deferred until November for action. It doesn't delay the ability to submit it as an MTP project if we can all agree on something. So that would be our hope. But yeah, I recognize the issues. Union County recognizes the issues, but the cumulative and secondary impacts of building this is not lost on us, and it's not lost on Mineral Springs.
And to clarify, as a point of information, there were several requests, just to clarify, because I wasn't sure what you were saying about who was coming to what table and when and was asked to. CRTPO asked everybody in January and February to come together on this, and Union County was the only respondent not to participate. So then they asked Waxhaw, hey, would you go out there and talk to them? And we did. We went to Mineral Springs and we went to Union County, and we didn't get any discussion. We just got the resolutions that say remove the corridor. And so this actual kind of interaction here is what has gotten the county to actually come to the table and have discussions. And that's why it's still valuable for us to engage in that.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Roger.
I guess what would be the procedure for abstaining for this?
So what we would, once the discussion on this, and there's no other, if there are any other motions or not, prior to the vote, we would ask for who would like to be withdrawn from voting on this issue, and then the TCC would have to vote to allow you not to vote. Because there's not like a conflict of interest as like a funding or anything. So
please be kind to me.
yeah. So we're gonna go through this slowly, make sure we get it right. So you may at this time put forward another motion.
The next TCC meeting, recommendation of the law committee, and even though we're technical committee, public input and cooperation is so important.
The motion would need to be to postpone indefinitely. So you would say, Madam Chairperson, I move to postpone the question until, and then state your reason.
I thought indefinitely meant it's basically
No.
never to come back.
Definite, yes.
Oh, definite. Okay, thank you.
Definite. Postpone definitely. So I postpone the question. So you'd say, Madam Chairperson, I move to postpone the question until, and then state your reason, and you would need a second.
Item the November 7th TCC meeting.
And I second that.
And now I can take a vote on that, right?
So now we have a second motion.
You have to move the first motion or not?
No, so that the first motion exists. This is the alternative motion. So now we may discuss the merits of the request to wait.
So from a debate perspective, since there's been a motion and second for a substitute secondary motion, the cons of waiting would be more delay and more confusion for the property owners involved. And really, another cost of this is additional time and dollars that we've already committed over hundreds of thousands of dollars to planning and discussion of this process. So now we're adding more cost and more of your time as well, when really this is a technical item. And hopefully we do come to some type of resolution among the three parties. Again, consider that this is a technical recommendation, and that technical recommendation does not necessarily mean that is the CRTPO's desire. So I would recommend that we leave this to the CRTPO board to decide. And from a technical perspective, that we go ahead and recommend the adoption of the Northeast and Southeast quadrants that are based on technical data and that's supported by public comment.
So I'll add to the discussion. We are all transportation professionals in this room. We have a high regard and respect for one another and the work that we do. We know how important it is. I like what you said, Erica, about this is the long game. Those of us that have been in this profession for decades, we know that we can never separate just the technical merits of the work that we do, that it is a balance of all of the other things that we're discussing. I think you've heard from some of our members today that there are some concerns about the discussion that we heard from our board, and we are optimistic and want to provide that opportunity to the parties to continue those conversations. And based on some of the information you shared, the meeting is in a week. We have until January to submit a potential project for the next phase of consideration. So we do have a bit more time. So I just wanted to share that perspective. Does anybody else have anything for discussion? All right. Having said that, we are now at the substitute motion, which was the second one, right, Travis? So we will take a vote on that. And do I have to do a roll call vote for that one?
So
We
we have
got a
we
second.
have a first and a second. We are
Yep.
now in discussion. So if discussion has ended. Sorry, my phone's
Yep.
not on. Because I think there's discussion about division of the House for the primary motion, not for the secondary motion. Is there still a question of division of the House, James?
Yes, I would call for a division of the House for this
Okay.
vote.
Yep. Which would only have been made with the motion, but we'll just respect that. So if anyone would like to, sorry, you have something to say for the discussion?
Well, I'm just going to say, from the technical coordinating committee standpoint, as a member from the town of Troutman, this alignment means absolutely nothing to me because I don't know what it does. But from the technical side, it affects less properties, and Waxaw owns a parcel of the new alignment. So from the technical side, that makes sense. But I ultimately think the decision, since there's ascension between three jurisdictions, is a political one that will happen at the next level. So I don't even know if bringing this back next month will make, we might be having the same conversation. I'm just saying that. So take that as you will.
Okay. Do I need to do that? So
Sure.
prior to a vote,
Yeah, prior to the vote.
and based on our bylaws, is there anyone that wants to be removed from the voting?
I have a question more than that. Are we voting for the first motion or on
This,
substitute?
the substitute motion.
The current motion is to postpone the question until the November 7th TCC meeting to allow the parties to meet on the scheduled date. So that is the question. So that is what we will vote on before an original motion, or if we go back to the original motion or not. So now the question is for that motion to delay the decision, does anyone wish to be withdrawn from voting on the issue?
All right. Now we'll move into voting.
Roll call.
Yes. So you're going to lead that?
So we'll do a roll call
We
vote
wanna
and
do
you'll
that.
start at James Kelly.
Question.
Yeah.
To clarify, this is a vote for delaying to the November 7th.
To the next TCC meeting to allow the meeting that you have scheduled to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the basis of that would result in increased costs and more time commitment. And really, this is a technical decision, which wouldn't impact the CRTPO vote necessarily. Waxaw would say no to the delay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then just go around the table.
Yeah. So James first. So you're no. Okay. Sorry.
Trying to wait for you to get
Yeah,
there
yeah,
so you
sorry.
can start counting. Okay.
No, Tracy Howe. Yes, Heather Maloney.
Yes. Rich Hoffman, Iredell County.
No, Matt Kirk, I'll say so.
Yes, Eric Martin, I want to.
Yes, Mom.
Sorry.
Faster, Travis.
So
Well, that's why I thought you'd go by the list.
I'm trying to do the. Oh, okay.
Does it be easier for you that way?
Yeah, that would be. So
I'm sorry.
sorry about that. We're gonna start again, but we'll start from the top. I have Huntersville, Iredell, Waxhaw, and focus area pedestrian. So CDOT director,
Yes.
sorry, general services,
Yes.
Charlotte planning,
Yes.
Town of Cornelius,
Yes.
Town of Davidson,
Yes.
Indian Trail. Here, Iredell County we have as a yes. Town of Matthews,
Yes.
Mecklenburg County Air Quality. Oh, she's gone. MTC,
Yes.
Mineral Springs,
Yes.
Town of Mooresville, Division 10,
Yes.
Division 12,
Yes.
Transportation Planning Division,
Yes.
Town of Stallings,
Yes.
and Statesville, but you were a no. Yep. Town of Troutman,
I'm gonna go with a no.
Union County,
Yes.
Village of Wesley Chapel,
Yes.
Focus Area Bicycle.
Yes.
Okay, so. So 18-4 and then 1, 2, 4 against. So that motion would move.
Okay, that motion moves forward. Now help me. What do I do with the first motion? That first motion
It's gone.
failed.
Yeah.
Or it's
gone. It's still on the table.
It's
Yeah, it's
Okay.
November 7th.
okay.
So
perfect.
question, to clarify, this will come back to the November 7th TCC, is that correct?
Yes.
And we will come back with the conclusions from our meeting that we have. And it is likely that that it may be the same information.
We understand. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone, for your patience and your participation. All right, that was our last action item. Now we'll move into information reports and we'll try to move through this quickly, but this is important information, but I know we're coming up on a pretty long meeting. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nat Hayward. I'm with Kinley Horn, transportation planner, helping working with CRTPO to lead the 2055 MTP. We've just got a quick status update. I know we're short on time, so I'll move through this pretty quickly. Some time for questions at the end. Want to kind of talk through some of our ongoing tasks, recently completed tasks, and kind of what we're looking head towards in the future. One thing we've just completed is our first phase of engagement, and I know we talked some about that at maybe one of our previous TCC meetings, gave some updates on that, and then also maybe at the scenario planning workshop last month, which most of you participated in. But the last thing that we've completed were our equity focus groups, and so what we've done is we're working with one of our sub-consultants that specializes in this kind of work, where we know that one place that some of the MTP engagement and planning engagement in general tends to fall short is engaging those voices that are maybe traditionally left out of the planning process, whether they're not targeted to directly or they don't have the opportunity to engage with the process. And so we want to be really intentional about how we engage with those groups. And so we've got a sub-consultant that work to identify different kind of EJ communities in the region, put out invitations for participation in these small group equity focus groups. And so we worked with members of the TCC, members of the board, our steering and advisory committee to identify community leaders, advocates in these kind of communities to help get the word out about participants who may want to engage in that process. We conducted the majority of these meetings, if not all of them, within the month of August. And the idea was to create some awareness about the development of the goals and objectives of the 2055 NTP and get feedback that we feel like could be useful for future elements in the planning process, whether that's prioritization, project selection, any other recommendations that come out of the 2055 MTP, and also helps influence our future engagement in the process. So this is sort of our first phase of 3 engagement phases in the 2055 MTP planning process. And it's a great opportunity for us to connect with these equity focus groups to learn how they like to be engaged in the future. And so we can make tweaks in that process as we move forward. Put up a list here of all of the equity focus groups that we had. We tried to be really intentional about our geography here, get a distribution across all 3 counties. We had some that were virtual, most were in person, but there were virtual options within each county. We even had a Spanish language group conducted in Mecklenburg County. Again, trying to be really intentional about that. And there were some meetings that were more well attended than others, and we're going to tweak our process for getting future participants when we do this again in the second round. Initial takeaways, probably nothing that's super surprising to anyone in this room. Probably heard a lot of these things before. Obviously our transportation network here in the region is largely reliant on needing a personal vehicle, which can be tough for a lot of communities that have lower affordability. And so those lack of kind of safe and convenient options can be a real barrier for transportation, especially when we're looking to access those critical services, whether that's healthcare, education, our jobs, public spaces, parks, greenways, those kinds of things that improve public health. And it's also acknowledgement that while there are some transit options out there that, oftentimes they fall short of people's needs, right? Where we've got deficiencies in travel times, reliability, safety concerns as well. And in general, when looking for improvements in the infrastructure for our transportation network, we heard that there's a perceived kind of lack of accountability in decision makers that talk about making improvements for some of these populations, and maybe they don't feel like it always happens or it's always followed through with. You guys may remember last month we went through a scenario planning workshop with this group. Thank you again to everyone who participated. I think that was a really successful conversation. Just to kind of quickly touch on that again, we worked to sort of define what scenario planning was as a part of the 2055 NTP process, talk through what was done in the past, and try to figure out how we're going to move forward with that for the 2055 process. And we feel like we were successful with that. We got good direction. And really our next steps we're continuing to work with our steering and advisory committee, kind of pulling the approach and the feedback that we got from this group to start to develop key drivers and performance indicators that will kind of drive that scenario planning process. And the goal is that it's a lot of work to do for that, as most of you might know. But our goal is to be done prior to the call for projects, which we hope to be early next year. And then we're also working with CRTPO staff on the congestion management process, the CMP. Again, for those who aren't fully aware, this is a federally required process. It's really the regional approach to managing congestion for the CRTPO region. And this process is sort of happening in parallel with the 2055 NTP. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of overlap between those two processes. And we're working with the CRTPO staff as we develop the 2055 NTP to make sure that we're kind of helping incorporate those CMP elements that will be memorialized in the MTP document, at a higher level as well. And there's a CMP task force that's a separate group that is sort of guiding that work that we're working pretty closely with as well. Obviously, that's a really technical process. We've got a lot of data that we've got to look through to understand what congestion looks like now. What are our baselines? What are we looking at for the future? How do we forecast those things? We're looking at INRIX data, travel time index. We're looking at travel speeds, travel time reliability, peak hour delay, all those things that you guys might expect. Kind of pouring through that data, working with staff to go through that as well. And the next steps on that is we're going to continue kind of finalizing our data collection, and we're going to provide some initial findings to the CRTPO staff. We're going to coordinate with member jurisdiction staff on the application of the strategy that the CMP task force is going to develop. And then once we kind of move past that, the sort of initial couple phases, we'll work on the documentation as well. So looking ahead, we've got a couple future tasks that we're kind of just starting to think about and diving into in more detail. I mentioned the roadway project submissions earlier. We're targeting those for January 2025. We've got a January 9th TCC meeting where we're planning to do a workshop at that time where we'll talk through the process for submitting those roadway projects for the member jurisdictions. We're going to have a project submittal website that hopefully should be a great, easy to use kind of intuitive tool for capturing that feedback. We'll talk through that then. And then as of now, this is still tentative, but we're still tentatively planning on that submission window to be from January 13th to February 14th. And we'll keep everyone updated, if and when those dates were to change. We're also working through revenue projections, especially for the roadway projects. This is really kicking off the financial planning process for the 2055 MTP. We've currently developed a summary of kind of assumed revenues for the 2055 MTP roadway projects. We've shared those with our steering and advisory committee and are talking through those. The next step will be to refine those projections as needed based on any feedback we get from those committees, and then start to look at non-roadway revenue projections for transit, bike ped, and then operations and maintenance. And I think with that, I'll open up for any questions.
Any questions?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Roger. And he's going to share some information with us about the CRTPO adjusted urban area boundary. Welcome to the podium.
Thank you. My name is Roger Castillo with the Transportation Planning Division. I'm here with Curtis Bridges from CRTPO. And we're just bringing this as an information item this month and hope to get approval at the next TCC and TAC next month. This is regarding the adjusted urban area boundary. So during this presentation, I'll kind of explain what that means, what that is, and kind of how that is done, and kind of some of the impacts that it will have on CRTPO. So what is an adjusted urban area boundary? It's basically an expansion from the census urban area boundary. Whenever the census comes out, they will publish the census urban area boundary, but oftentimes you'll see it'll have like very jagged edges on the side, and it could go kind of in and out of some roadways. This process is basically there to kind of help adjust or smooth that out, so it includes a lot of those roadways that are kind of going in and out. And this is just to better smooth it out so that it also coincides with urban area land use as well. So it includes those type of roadways as well. Oftentimes you'll see roadways that only part of them are within the boundary, and then it kind of gets picked up again in another section of the boundary. So that's kind of one of the reasons for this process. So this process is repeated alignment. Is repeated during the census releases, and if this is not basically, if this is not approved, if this adjusted urban area is not approved, then FHWA would consider the 2020 census urban area boundary as the boundary, basically. Some general goals when smoothing this is, again, to completely include those roadways that are kind of going in and out that fall within the urban area boundaries, and also to create one contiguous boundary, meaning no holes, no random islands scattered everywhere. So it's just kind of bring it all together. So this is not a requirement. As I mentioned before, if CRTPO does not want to move forward with the adjustment of the urban area boundary, then FHWA would just assume the census UA would be the one. But here's just some links and stuff to that. So some general guidelines. There's quite a bit of them. There's a link at the bottom there that kind of goes in further detail, but this is just some general guidelines when adjusting the area. The adjusted urban area boundary will encompass the census area, so it's more of an expansion. The adjusted urban area boundary will be one single contiguous area with no holes or discontinuities, and it's to encompass areas just outside of that the urban areas that may be impacted by urban development and things like that. And also the adjusted urban area boundary should be defined so that there's less confusion or ambiguity, and that's one of the main goals of this process. So what are the benefits? These are the benefits outlined by FHWA, aligning the urban area boundary with existing planning boundaries, addressing irregularities in the urban area boundary shapes, maintaining that consistency for highway functional classifications, which I'll get to in a sec, and including transit routes or traffic generators. That's something else that is taking a look at. Incorporating knowledge from urban form, land use, things like that. So anything that, again, impacts from the urban area, and fostering an inclusive, effective, comprehensive transportation planning process. So one of the main things here, and one of the big reasons why we're bringing this here, is regarding the federal aid system. So the interaction of these of the urban boundaries with the federal aid system. As you can see here on these maps here, the purple lines is the roads that are defined under the federal aid system. And you can see the pinkish area here is the census urban area boundary. I want to give props to Bjorn and Theo for kind of bringing some of these examples to our attention as well. But just looking at, for example, Waxhaw Marvin, you'll see that because the census urban area is so like hugging the road, there are a lot of just kind of specs, and it's kind of cut off. So it leaves a lot of ambiguity on kind of like, is this road completely part of the federal aid system, things like that. And you can see there, Faith Road just south of Mooresville, how it just kind of part of it is in and then is out and then is in again. So a lot of this process is just kind of help with that ambiguity. So just to kind of help do that. And this mainly affects minor collectors. So any minor collector, that falls outside of the urban area boundaries, it would not be considered in the federal aid system. So this is just kind of help include those into that. And then Curtis has been working on basically adjusting the urban area boundary. And this is a map that he's created. So I'm going to pass it over to Curtis just to kind of help explain that a little further.
Thanks, Roger. So the map you're seeing here captures the adjustments that we're recommending to the urban area. The original census urban area is there in the dark blue, and the kind of light bright green is the expanded area that we are recommending for your recommendation to the MPO. A little bit more about the underlying mapping and analysis that went into this map. We did consider, as Roger mentioned, existing federal aid routes. Make sure we are including that in the scope of this proposed map. We are considering the MTP projects that you all submitted, that larger pool of projects submitted for scoring. And then we also drilled down on the minor collectors within that pool of MTP submitted projects. Roger also mentioned that a little bit earlier. We need to keep a few constraints in mind as we went through this. We did need to use kind of snap out to logical boundaries for that border, those being roads, water bodies, some other natural features. We also need to make sure that we were not overlapping our neighboring urban area boundaries, those being Gaston Cleveland to the west, Cabarrus Rowan to the east, even RFATS to the south in South Carolina. We are still crossing over into South Carolina and into RFATS there towards just south of the South Carolina border. And then we have Cabarrus Rowan and the Gaston Cleveland link is still kind of encroaching into our Mecklenburg County area in a few locations. So we need to make sure we're not overlapping those boundaries. And then we also need to stay kind of approximate to the original census proposed boundary. We don't want to go too far outside of that. We really just want to smooth those outside edges. But again, the intent being to fill in the gaps and donut holes and make sure that we had a contiguous urban area. So that's what we produced, the map you're seeing here. I'll stop and see if you have any questions. And I think Roger has a few more resources to share with you. Brian, yes.
Yes, thank you. And I understand this is primarily an exercise for the minor collectors in the federal aid system, but it's come to my attention that there could be implications to the urban populations and formulas that we use to how we allocate transit funding. And I think that's okay. I'll just say that. But I think we should be aware of what that means or how to see what that possibly could be. And basically how we do that is we take the populations of Iredell, Union, Mecklenburg, and within Mecklenburg, the unincorporated versus the incorporated, when we think respectively of MTS or Mecklenburg Transportation System and CATS, Charlotte Area Transit System. So I'm curious, have you ran the populations of these green areas within that lens?
Oh, sorry. No, I just wanted to go back to a slide because it might clear something up, but you can go ahead and use this one right here.
Yeah, Brian, we have not gone through that exercise yet. We know that they're up to CATS and the transit folks have some pretty stringent guidelines as to how to do that. So we're happy to do that when that's appropriate, and then maybe now. But just let us know. We can work with you on that.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do, just so we're aware of what that change is. I'm not saying that anybody would necessarily be opposed to smoothing out the boundaries. We just kind of to have that understanding of what the impact may or may not be to the formula.
Absolutely.
And I guess just something minor on this slide to kind of go with that. It does say that there is no federal requirement for them to make adjustments to recalculate population numbers if you guys choose to adjust the boundaries as well. So just want to point that out.
I had a question on the map that showed the revised urbanized area. If you're hitting that section of Waxhaw Marvin Road, seems like there should that area in green, or the area that's not shown in green, just south of the Mecklenburg County line against South Carolina. Wish I had a laser pointer. Yep.
Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, should that be green?
Yeah, I believe it is. I don't know how to zoom in.
It's not now.
Let me see. Magnify maybe. Because this part right here,
it's to the north a little. Yeah, it's right in there.
I wonder if
If you guys, if it just doesn't show up here, that's fine. I just want to make sure that's not an oversight.
Yeah, I believe it was included
Yeah.
because that was one of the main sections that we looked at.
Yeah, in fact, that was the first one we looked at. So just to the left of the little thumb there, that is green. That's a
Okay.
small
All right,
section.
couldn't see it from
But the larger area to the north and south, those are not included.
Yeah, and with a lot of the roads that were just on the border and kind of weaving in and out, a lot of it's just to make sure that it goes just a little bit beyond, so that depending on the line work that's being used for the federal aid system, that make sure that those are included.
I really appreciate the flexibility to deal with these little pieces because they, to the layperson and to all of us, it's just a hindrance. It doesn't pass the smell test. So I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
There are a few resources here if you guys are interested in terms of for FHWA that has regarding the census UA and kind of like what that is and some of the guidelines behind it. But and as for the schedule, as I mentioned earlier, we're coming to the TCC and TAC for information this month. We did present at the staff meeting yesterday, and we hope to go next month for approval and then also to submit it in November as well, since the deadline for this is late November. So, but if interested in our contact info, here it is. So if you have any questions, just please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Roger and Curtis? All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Moving into the last section of our agenda. As always, you have project updates for Division 10 and 12 that were included in your agenda packets. And Sean and Anil are with us today if you have questions for them after the meeting. Warren, you have an update for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was debating looking at the clock in the room as to whether to do this or not, but as a Turnpike Authority employee, I have to. Did want to bring news to the TCC that last week on Wednesday, September 25th, the Turnpike Authority opened Complete 540 Phase 1, an 18-mile long extension of Raleigh's outer loop that extends the Toll Triangle Expressway through southern Wake County. Geographically, I realize I probably should have brought a map. Geographically, it's roughly the equivalent of the 45 loop here between 74 and 77. It's a little longer than that. but it doubles the length of the tolled section of the outer loop around Raleigh. There's now just one segment left before Raleigh gets its loop. And the significance, I think, for this region and for the state as a whole is that by dramatically expanding the length of the Triangle Expressway, we've effectively converted it into a bypass of I-40. That's how it's going to function now for a while until the loop is closed, which will, I think, increase the number of people using toll roads in North Carolina, getting accustomed to them, getting their NC Quick Pass, discovering the value of that transponder, and just essentially adding to people's experience with toll roads in the state. So thank you for the opportunity as always. And Travis, I'll get you a shortened version for the minutes. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Curtis, you have an update for us?
We just had two items in our work group agenda for this afternoon, but we are importantly going to begin the discussion on our 2025 focus area reps. So we expect to have recommendation for that to you in December, and then you all will take action on that in January. So we'll do that this afternoon. I'm happy to answer any questions. All right,
Thank you. And Travis, bring us to a close.
Thank you. So we have two just upcoming issues or reminders. First, just as a reminder to register for or if you would like to register for the Scott Cole Legacy Scholarship Fundraiser Walk Run, we have a QR code on there that will take you to the registration information. Second, as we discussed, or as was mentioned earlier, Western North Carolina has seen unprecedented disaster. If you're looking for information about disaster relief, this is the link, or the QR code will take you to the Disaster Relief Fund FAQ and more information on how you can be involved and participate. And again, we just highly recommend that everyone does what they can, and just hope that we can get back to normal as fast as reasonable. Oh, and third item is that the fall call is still open for 2024. So please get your submittals, and then don't forget we need to schedule one-on-ones with you prior to your submittal. So make sure to get that information in. And I believe that is all of the upcoming items. Yep.
All right, great. Thank you all for your time and participation. Thanks for hanging in a little bit longer than normal. With that, we have completed all items on our agenda. We are adjourned.